we're diving into a really fascinating text called Bringing Forth Soul Consciousness. And what's so interesting about it is that the author says she didn't really write it, but that the wisdom was channeled directly through her from a collective of, well, non-physical spiritual beings. To give you a taste of the perspective here, let's just start with this quote from the book's companion journal. If you learn to fully love only one person, and may it be yourself, you will have exceeded our expectations. Wow, right? It's a really powerful and honestly a pretty universal idea. And it's really the heart of everything we're about to unpack. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at what this channeled guidebook actually is. Then we'll meet what it calls your spiritual support team. After that, we'll get into the how, embodying your soul's light. Then we'll explore the why, the promises of healing and purpose, and we'll wrap up with the core concept of aligning with divine will. Okay, first up, a channeled guidebook. Let's dig into where this text supposedly came from and what its most basic foundational ideas are. So the author is Reverend Annie Batchelder, and her story is that this book kind of came out of nowhere. She'd signed up for a simple writing class to get better at marketing, and instead, she just started channeling these messages from what she calls the Akashic beings of light. She had zero intention of writing a book like this. And that brings us to this foundational concept, the Akashic Records. Now, the book doesn't describe this as some dusty old library in the sky. It's presented as an infinite, dynamic resource, almost like a spiritual cloud server that holds every single thought, word, and action of every soul across all of its lifetimes. At the very center of this whole cosmology is a figure they call the Great Creatress. And again, this isn't some static, distant god. It's described as the source of all creation itself, a divine feminine energy that's always growing and always changing, right along with the universe. So where do you fit into this picture? Well, the soul is seen as a unique, individual spark of that great creatress. And the whole point, according to this text, is for each soul to go out and have experiences, allowing the creatress to experience herself in all the millions of tiny, intricate details of life. Now, to make these pretty abstract ideas feel a bit more real and grounded, the author also created this companion journal. It's packed with interactive exercises and questions, so it's not just about reading, it's about turning the whole thing into a personal, hands-on practice. Okay, so that covers the core concepts, the what. But who exactly is doing all this talking? This brings us to what the book calls your spiritual support team, the cast of spiritual guides that it claims is available to absolutely everyone. According to this book, every person has what's called an Akashic Spiritual Advisory Team. It's like your own personal divine council. You've got the Akashic beings of light who kind of oversee the whole process. Then there are masters who've apparently been with your soul since day one. You also have teachers who are specialists in specific areas like love or money. And get this, even your deceased relatives and friends are on the team, offering quiet, loving support. And here's the key thing about this team. The book really stresses that they're humble. They're not looking for worship or adoration. Their only goal is to help. They're presented as being on call, 24/7, ready to assist with anything you ask, big or small. All right, so we've covered the what and the who. Now, let's get to the how. This next part, embodying your soul's light, is all about the core practice the book teaches for making a real, personal connection to all of these ideas. The main technique, really the centerpiece of the whole book, is a guided visualization. The whole point is to consciously connect what it calls the human self, that's you living your day-to-day life, with the higher consciousness of your soul. It's about making this stuff a felt experience, not just something you think about. So here's how the practice works, in a nutshell. First, you become aware of your soul chakra, which is described as a sphere of light about a foot above your head. Step 2, you visualize that light just pouring down through the top of your head, filling up every single cell in your body. Then you send your consciousness up to connect with that great creatress energy. And finally, and this is a cool part, you create a physical memory file, like touching your finger to your palm, to anchor that feeling so you can get back to it instantly. And once again, this is designed to be an interactive process. The journal gives you prompts like these, asking you to reflect on your vision, on your creativity while you're doing the exercise. It's all about deepening that personal experience. But, why do all this? What's the point? This next section, Healing Purpose and Past Lives, gets into the why of it all. The ultimate promise of these practices and the real-world benefits the author claims they can bring. To really illustrate the power of these ideas, the author shares her own incredible journey. The book talks about how she first learned to channel way back in 1988. And then, in the 90s, she says she healed herself from some really serious illnesses, like an ovarian cyst the size of a grapefruit and even multiple sclerosis. All this years before she stumbled upon a book about the Akashic Records, and then in 2019, unexpectedly began channeling this book. And what's really fascinating is how she frames these struggles. The text says, each healing was sourced in a subtle spiritual nudge, urging her to turn inward toward her soul and the light. So in this view, her biggest challenges weren't punishments, they were actually catalysts pushing her toward spiritual growth. The book also dips into the idea of past lives. It suggests that real healing can happen when you revisit these past lives within the Akashic Records and use the light to neutralize negative energy that might have carried over into your current life. And all of this leads us to the final and arguably most important concept, aligning with divine will. This is really presented as the fundamental choice that a person has in how they want to live their life. The text really lays out two opposing forces you can operate from. On one side, there's self-will. This is described as that pushy, brittle, fear-driven energy. You know the feeling. It's limited because it can only see what's right in front of it. On the other side, you have divine will. This is presented as harmonious, far-seeing, and it actually uses your own personal drive to help fulfill your soul's bigger purpose. And you guessed it, the journal gives you practical tools for this. The exercises prompt you to go into the Akashic Records, to ask for guidance, to consciously release that old baggage from past experiences, and to clear the path for this new alignment. So the core message of the entire book really boils down to this. When you make a conscious choice to align your personal will with this bigger, divine will, all that resistance you feel just starts to dissolve. The journey of life becomes easier and way more inspired. Which really leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. The fundamental argument of this book is that our consciousness is what shapes our reality. So, what if you're not just living a life, but what if you're actually designing one?